how do you manage that overwhelming wave of data? How do you manage all of the different types of services? You almost are mandated to start changing the core of the network to get ready for that.
If you look at the way that networks are evolving, it's moving everything towards the cloud. So of course we have to focus on software as a key element of the mix.
Of maximum importance for us to keep the standards evolving in the best way.
We should work together on that standardization, that interoperability, and kind of feed off of each other to drive that innovation cycle.
You got to make sure that you're embarking on a transformation on the people front as well as process front.
Service providers, over-the-top guys, application providers, car manufacturers, all these verticals, we're going to have to work closer and closer.
A lot of our customers are standing up voice over LTE for the first time. We've got a simple choice. Am I going to buy a box to do that the old-fashioned way, which will become a boat anchor in 5 years' time? Or am I going to license a piece of software and deploy it on standard off-the-shelf hardware, in which case it'll live forever in my network? It's a very simple and easy choice to make at that point.
Drive some of this standardization, but leverage that NFV platform, whether it's virtual network functions onboarding or federations or API standards, etc. So we become more software centric. And as we all know, software is king. That's the way to success.
Hello, good evening and welcome to this TelecomTV Main Agenda Live. I'm Martyn Warwick, the Editor-Chief of TelecomTV, and we'll be moderating the panel this evening. We're here in the Hotel de Anza in downtown San Jose in California. And this is a famous old hotel, very old by some standards in the United States. Began to build it in 1929, about the time of the Wall Street crash, and it was finished in 1931, quite a while before Prohibition was repealed. I didn't mean to say you couldn't get a drink in here. We do know that much. And they were cheap too. So, having said that, let's talk about this event. It's a TelecomTV live event sponsored by Intel and Nokia, and we're looking at the proposition that transformation is not simply a CSP challenge. It's a challenge for the vendors as well, and others, and we'll get into that in a minute. But before we start, I would, of course, obviously like to introduce this very knowledgeable panel. And I'm going to start with the lady on my left, Jehanne Savi, who is Executive Leader, All IP and On-Demand Network Program at Orange. Welcome, Jehanne. Jehanne has come the farthest today by far. She has just arrived from Paris, and for her it is 4:30 in the morning. So she's doing brilliantly well.
I need your support.
Next to her on her left is Ron Haberman, VP Emerging Products at Nokia, who hasn't come very far at all.
But with traffic.
But the traffic's really bad. Okay. Next to him is Shawn Hakl, who is Vice President Verizon. I don't know how far you've come.
New Jersey.
Shawn? New Jersey.
I was just happy to get out.
Yeah. He said it. And last but by no means least, down at the far end there, is Lynn, Senior Director, Industry Enabling and Marketing Vendor Ecosystem at Intel Corporation. Lynn, welcome again. Glad to see you here.
Good to see you.
Hope you can hear me all right.
Oh, no problem. 2 hours, Portland. It's all good.
Okay. Well, yes, we have not come that far either. So, and we've not come we've come from Campbell, so it's not too far. Right, let's get into this, and let's begin by suggesting that NFV and SDN have occasioned massive change in the global industry, not least because it's occasioned the transformation of the old customer service provider market and industry that we used to know so well. That's one thing that's happening, but at the same time, vendors, I believe, will also have to change as well to accommodate what's actually happening around the place and to see how they can best serve this new dynamic of the transformed network. And I'm going to give my first question to Jehanne, which is this: the value chain, the traditional value chain that we've seen before. How do you see, as a representative from a CSP, how do you see that value chain changing? And where are vendors are going to sit on it? Are they going to be in one place, or are they going to be transcendental in several places at the same time?
Yes, obviously the value chain is evolving, and for the vendors, I think it's probably obvious that it will be significant also for their positioning, and they should evolve in their positioning not only on the value chain of the global ecosystem of the traditional vendors as well as pure IT players. So what we expect from the CSP standpoint is that the vendors clearly assume this shift of their value model or of their business model, and clearly probably split their activities between their infrastructure provider activities or cloud platform activities, their rather VNF vendor activities that are rather an editor model, an IT editor model, and there may be also integrator activities since we still need a kind of end-to-end integration, and that will be one probably key issues of this SDN and NFV advent to make it integrated end-to-end, as well as able to be manageable all along the life cycle management journey. That could be a point. So to make it short, and from our standpoint, really we expect this split because it's different business model. If you want to position yourself in the cloud platform, in the VNF, or in the integration, it's different business models, and we also probably would source different vendors. And there's this question that Ron mentioned that the second VNF is probably the most difficult, and then the job is done. I think that's a good illustration also of the necessity for the service provider to have different providers and probably a multi-vendor ecosystem, but not homogeneously on this value chain, depending on the positioning.
Thank you. Ron, mentioned there of second VNF. What does that mean?
What it means is a way to illustrate how a true cloud design can be achieved. So we work today a little bit in two extremes, right? On the one hand, we do primarily system deals where operators are essentially buying stacks of different applications, different use cases that come prepackaged with everything required. And on the other, pure play in layered approach, right? So either an orchestrator by itself, hardware by itself, an NFVI layer by itself, where software will come at some point in the future. And the second VNF concept, from my perspective, is the test of going from one to the other. So if you look at what it takes to have a design for a single VNF on infrastructure, and you deploy it, the moment where you try to allocate enough room, orchestration, onboarding for the second VNF on the same infrastructure as opposed to a different stack, you've solved most of what you're going to have to solve to add the third and the fourth and the fifth. Okay? So that step is the hardest one, to go from a system integrated deal to a true cloud environment. That's the second VNF approach.
Thank you. Right. Shawn, Verizon. What do you make of the vendor value chain and ecosystem now? And is it adapting to the needs of the CSPs as quickly or as effectively as you think it might? And if not, why not?
So I think in a lot of cases, we see a lot of innovation coming out of our supplier partners, but there's also a sort of a troubling trend in terms of their desire to do two kind of things, right? One, they keep inventing an enterprise sales force to kind of reach around and go direct to try to stream off the top end of the customer. And that forces, you know, a certain amount of behavior. And then they backdoor that into trying to offer a software as a service model where, hey, wouldn't it just be great if we just built this cloud for you and you could just put it through there, which really effectively makes me a coupon clip, you know, and take the coupon from the customer and pass along the lead and everything's good, which is, of course, is, you know, our value to the customer is our ability to operationalize technology. And so the notion of handing that over to folks is a little bit of a challenge. And it recreates a model where it's difficult for any of the participants to make a decent return on investment for capital, right? Where we're essentially creating an environment where there's multiple sources to a single SKU, where people are horse trading to try to get super efficient distribution to get to the last few points of margin. And it really, if you want us to adopt, you know, I have plenty of services I can do that with. If you want me to adopt the new technology, we have to find new ways to add value to the customer and recognize the value of that intellectual property. And if it's really just a horse race to putting the same basic set of features and functions in kind of a slightly new delivery package, that's going to be, you're going to see these SPs having a really hard time investing a ton of money in that model.
So I take it then, so yeah, I'm just going to say that, so basically your thesis is that you're not really a fan of software as a service.
I am not.
And I mean, that's clear. Ron.
So let me maybe try to make an argument for why software as a service does make sense, at least in some cases. And granted, not everybody will go for every model, and by far we're not going to try to argue that it's the only model, right? So all disclaimers aside, we see quite a lot of operators now trying to take advantage of the fact that they will no longer have to deal with things like upgrades. As new features come in, they don't want to have to continue to deal with the life cycle of the feature set of a particular software, and if they can consume it as a service from a vendor, they would like to take advantage of it. Now, I understand what you're saying when it comes to a value add, but it's not a replacement of how the software works. It's just a delivery model, a business model that takes some of the load in managing the installation off your hands. It's just part of a component of the chain. And at any point in time, of course, if you're not happy with the vendor delivering it, you can replace them, right? It's not locking you in any way.